how you guys are thinking about future proofing, and especially now that we know that applying consent management outside the US will result in catastrophic data loss. How can organizations plan ahead to mitigate this catastrophic data loss, right? So how did you guys approach this? We'll start with Raj.
Oh yeah. So this is something, as Jay mentioned, we anticipated, we knew that this is going to happen, and there are so many clients who really worry about this. Like once they apply with GDPR, all their data will be gone. So yeah, there are some solutions that you can definitely plan ahead and you can think of while grabbing some data. I won't see like you'll be having exact same data. So there are some things that that comes under gray area. So first of all, you need to really work with your privacy team and legal team to identify what comes under as per the, because every company and every privacy and legal team has their own terms of complying with these acts. So you need to really closely work with these teams and the experts, and to figure out what comes under this privacy act and what is okay, what is not okay. Okay, and in case of Bear Crop Science, what we did, we decided, let's do one thing. Let's try to grab data, very minimal data, okay, which won't be obviously which will be complying under the GDPR hood, and we are making sure that we are getting every minimal data which we required, but we are not tracking anything extravagant. Okay, so we came up with this approach of having a hard-coded beacon where you just end up tracking very minimal data about the user, for example, like page views and domain information, stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay, so this is that fallback tracking you guys shared me a slide about, right? So let me share that slide as well.
And Raj, if you don't mind, I just want to mention real quick the thought process that we took when it came to designing a fallback data model was the old school idea of server-side tracking. A lot of the regulations that are out there these days, as Justin mentioned earlier, apply largely to all the things around cookies and client-side data collection. But at the end of the day, a company, let's just pretend the worst case scenario came along and client-side data collection of any sort was never allowed, right? A company like Bear still has the ability to go in and do server-side analysis. They can still see what pages were served up, how often they were served up, and what type of general interactions occurred with those pages, because that's all collected by their own servers. So the idea was to sit back and say, well, how can we mimic something to that effect from a data model, but do it with client-side tracking, right? So that we're not losing that client-side data collection, but we're also not pushing the bounds of the legality, right? We're not trying to find ways to skirt the law here. Instead, we're trying to say, how can we do this and stay within the law and continue with the current paradigm that we're all used to, which is client-side data collection. And that's what led to this fallback scenario here.
Okay, and I think that's, oh, you go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, well, I think the one thing that I would add to that as well, and I would really recommend to anyone thinking about taking this approach, right? One of the big things that we had to think about was aligning, like Raj and Jay have said, with our actual legal team, since we're not the attorneys, to understand what their interpretation of these laws are. The other thing that we had to also do within Adobe was to create a governance process over every single data point that we collect, so that we understand how we identify them from a personal identifiable data perspective, as well as sensitive identifiable information. And so while we did go this route, we also did it with the guidance of our legal team. And I want to make sure I point that out and recommend that to anyone who does this at their respective company as well.
Right. Yeah. Aligning with legal is a quite important step here, right? And that's what I wanted to point out. Like even though you guys are still capturing some tracking or some beacon, some data, it's it's within the legal boundaries, and that's really cool. So Raj, walk us through this.
Oh yeah. So first of all, we termed it fallback tracking. It's a pretty interesting name. It might become an industry standard one day. You never know. So yeah, speaking about fallback tracking, as the name says, if someone is not opting in, so definitely you cannot track everything what you would track in an opt-in scenario. So in that case, we decided to come up with this strategy where we have hard-coded beacons. I hope that reminds you of no JavaScript days, right? So where you used to put a very simple beacon and you used to fire everything and grab everything, which is very important. So yeah, as you can see, that helped us generate 100% of the interactions data, and we tried to kept things really minimal, like page, domain, and some other measurements like, somebody opting in, opting out, all that data. And we also made sure that no cookies are getting deployed, because cookie is something which people take lightly. But when it comes to GDPR is more strict towards cookies rather than the beacons, right? Because in this scenario, especially fallback tracking, we are still firing a beacon, but we are making sure that no cookie is getting set. Okay, so that is something we thought of. And then obviously, as I mentioned, it's a hard-coded server call, and yeah, I mean, it obviously has advantage, a lot of advantage over not having any data getting tracked, but it comes with some downside, which is that it sometimes, not sometimes, it will, like, obviously if somebody is opting in after a certain point in time, then that user gets counted in two ways. Like, first, it gets counted in through a fallback tracking, which would be a fallback ID. And then, once it opts in, then the ECID kicks in, and then that user will get identified as MID. So a same user might get counted twice. But we came with a solution for that. Maybe Jay can answer on that.
Yeah, our big solution there was to set up a dimension and a metric to identify each hit as opt-in or opt-out. So we could then segment the appropriate data sets. That way we didn't have to worry about somehow mistakenly doing analysis on data sets that included both opt-in and opt-out hits. So we have the ability essentially to just say, don't show me any opt-out hits if we want to do an analysis on the full data set. And then if we want to do reporting back to somebody like Justin and say, hey, what's your opt-in rate these days? We can quickly and easily, through the use of a single dimension, just give him percentages and show that trended over time.
Okay, that's cool. So one highlight here. So the hard-coded server call, that means you guys you're essentially building the URL yourselves. You're constructing that beacon manually, without using the library, right? Because the library would still set the cookie and capture some data that's not wanted, right? But you guys, just knowing the essentials and the building blocks of everything, you guys went ahead and built this manually.
Mm-hmm.